What's happening, everybody, and welcome back to the Chaplaincy on the Go podcast. I'm your host, Josh Zorhoff, and this podcast is brought to you by the Fearless Chaplaincy and my good friends at Care Portal. Care Portal is a technology platform that exists to help individuals who are at risk with falling into the foster care system stay out of those risks by getting the resources and helps that they need from community members and from churches in the area. And we are so thankful for Care Portal and what they're doing in West Michigan and throughout the country. I'm really excited for this podcast episode. I'm excited for you to meet someone who just really inspired me as I was interacting with some material that she created. I've known this person for a while, and her husband actually works on staff at the family of churches where I work at either Ridgepoint or Cultivator Third Coast. Her name is Marcy Kolean, and she is a coach with an organization called Winning at Home. If that sounds familiar to you because you've listened on the podcast, my friend Dave McGovern and Deb Brink, who have both been on this podcast, also work at Winning at Home. Marcy is a coach. She does life coaching and she does other coaching with them. She helps people take a next step in their lives. And she came up with a resource that when I saw it, I thought, we've got to talk about this on the podcast. This resource is a resource for everybody, but specifically for teenagers as they enter into the high school years or the middle school years. For those of you listening in, following along kind of seasonally with this podcast, we're going to launch this podcast just as school is starting. And when school starts for kids, there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of image stuff that they're working through. There's a lot of identity stuff that they're working through. And it can be a really hard time for our children as they enter into those middle school and high school years. And I know that when I was a therapist at Winning at Home, and when I did work more on the clinical side as a private practice, I had a lot of parents coming in who their kids were wrestling with identity and they were wrestling with image things. They were wrestling with anxiety. And Marcy has done a ton of work with young women who are working through their image, they're working through body image, their self-image, they're working through what is my identity, who am I? And she came up with a resource that she's going to talk about in the podcast. And we're going to make this resource, we're going to give you access to it. You can get it at Marcy's Linktree, and she's selling it for like 99 cents, super cheap. And it's a great resource. If you are a parent, you have young children, it's a great resource, and she's going to talk about it. So we're excited for you to hear about what Marcy created, and really excited for you to dive into the conversation on how do we help our kids find a grounded identity in who they are and a better self-image of themselves. I can't wait for you to hear from Marcy. We're going to start that conversation right now. Well, welcome, Marcy, to the podcast. Super excited to have you. Marcy, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from, where you're at right now, what you're doing, all the things.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Super great to be on here. My name is Marcy Kolean. I am from the West Michigan area, live in Zeeland with my husband and 2 kids. I have a freshman this year and a senior. So big stuff happening at our house.
Wow.
Yeah. I also am a coach at Winning at Home in Zeeland. I get to work with young women, middle school, high school, up until even I have some people in their 60s, some ladies in their 60s. Basically, kind of the root of what I get to do is it's a lot of self-image work with women. And so, especially in school, you see a lot of, like you had said, identity crisis that happens. I feel like, in middle school, especially, you're starting to be a little bit more self-aware, a little bit more self-conscious. And then you also start to believe some of the life situations that you have and mark those as an identity instead of being anchored in the Lord. And so it is super great to be able to work through some of those kind of issues with them. So
So
that's a
why?
just
Yeah, no, no. Why do you think middle school is the pivot point? Like, what's the shift from elementary, third, fourth grade, and then you enter into fifth, sixth, seventh grade? What's going on there?
I think there's a lot of things. I mean, you're coming from this carefree, playful environment, right? You have recess, you have friends, you do lot more fun things in class, and it starts to become a little more serious. And then you've got puberty, of course, that happens. So you've got hormone changes, body changes. You're a little bit more self-conscious and more aware of other people instead of just kind of being in your own playful world. All of a sudden, you've got this a little bit of comparison that starts. You're like, oh, well, and I think women do that anyways from middle school on, we start to compare ourselves. And I think there's just more of this self conscious approach to life at that age. So,
And with the self-conscious approach, the image management, the comparison game for young women in particular, when you talk about the kind of the narrative of the world or the culture that's around us speaking into that, what are some of the cultural narratives that you've seen in young women? And maybe this is just an interesting question too. How is that different than when you were in middle school? Or is it?
I think in a lot of ways it's different. I mean, you've got technology that has influenced kids this age. So you've got TikTok, you've got Instagram, you've got Snapchat, and everybody portrays the best versions of themselves on there, or there's Photoshop even that is all digital where you're seeing images where they're not real. And this
Right.
is only just a small little pinpoint of their life that you're seeing. And now you're looking at your life and saying, well, my life doesn't look that good. My body doesn't look that good. I'm not that smart, right? You've got AI even to compete with. I'm not that smart. And all of a sudden you go down this downward spiral of, well, I must have done something wrong. I might not be good
Yeah.
enough. Maybe I'm not
Yeah.
worthy. Yeah. And so same and different. I mean, I think when you and I were in school, there was other things that influenced us. But I think with technology these days, it is just in their face all the time.
Yeah, it's identity formation on steroids now,
Oh, it's
or whatever the term, might be, but it's so much more intense. I remember a thought leader once saying that one of the problems with how social media forms us is we don't post a picture of what we think we want to see. We post a picture about like what we think other people want to see. But
oh, for sure.
because we're posting it, it becomes a part of our identity and we identify with that post. And so effectively we are we are changing our personality and we are putting forth a version of ourselves that we believe is true of us, but it's actually based on not even what other people think, it's what we think other people think. And so
Yeah,
there's this deeper level of challenge. There's this deeper level of I don't even know who I am. And most days, and I feel like this is true for middle school specifically, you're trying on personalities like you're trying on clothing. And you're trying to see, how do I fit in this crowd? How do I fit in this group? How do I fit with this person? How do I fit with my boyfriend or my girlfriend, or what, how do I fit with my gender? Even just all of these
absolutely.
things. And at the same time, while you're trying to fit and you're trying to try these all on, you don't even know who you are.
Exactly. And based on, your history or your circumstance, you're constantly editing and narrating to control whatever narrative somebody else is going to think about you. That's it.
And And that's a typical scenario. That doesn't include things like a broken home of origin or family trauma or abuse or, pain in the past that of course impacts narrative and whatever shame story you're carrying at the same time.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's amazing how many things shape us and then start to become our identity, right? I came
Yeah.
from a broken home. I see a lot
Mm,
of girls here with broken homes, and it's amazing to me how they come out and feel like, well, I must not be worth the time because, my dad is gone, or, my mom has to work all the time and she's not home. And how sometimes that even makes them feel not good enough, or they go to other friends or other influences on social media to define their worth.
yeah. I'm grateful that you bring up just the broken home aspect or the absent parent aspect. I remember years ago I heard a professor at Cornerstone. He said that the primary like change agent in how we image ourselves, how we see ourselves, is our image of God. But the primary way that people learn the image of God as children is the image of their parent, specifically the image of father and mother in that, in that respective like piece. There's a part of like seeing your mom as a child that helps you understand who God is. And there's a part of seeing your dad. And if there's a fracture there, well, then you're going to walk away with some fractured understandings of who God is.
For sure. For sure. I mean, think about the biggest influences you have in your life are the people that are closest to you. And so
Yeah.
when they see or hear you talk about yourself or about other people, you are, as a child, taking in all of that information and creating your story, right? Our brains do this fun thing called confabulation, or I think that's what it's called, right? Where we take in information, and if it doesn't quite make sense to us, our brains will fill in the gap. It'll fill in the story and to
Yep.
make it make sense. But that doesn't mean it's true. But we do
Correct.
that, and then we believe that.
Correct. Brene Brown talks about this in her research. And she says, essentially, a gap by definition must be filled. And it will be filled with what you think, which is typically a conspiracy. And so we've got a lot of adults, a lot of children, a lot of young adults that have an idea of what they and who they are, but that's not completely like filled. And so they fill it with what they think. And then they create this conspiracy theory about themselves, which effectively becomes their story and their narrative.
Exactly. And you take middle school, when you're coming off of an elementary where you're imaginative and you've got all
Yes.
this different ideas of how things
Yes.
could be, and you blow it up. Like,
Yes.
there's just that little bit of I mean, they're getting mature, and so there's a little bit of that extra confidence in their story, but there's
Yep.
still that immature creativity that they've got in there that is beautiful, but when it's in the right spot.
And you're right, the rigor is so much different. I mean, you're getting up earlier, right? I mean, Anthony Cosello lives right next door to us, and that poor guy, he was walking his kids out I'm making breakfast at 7 a.m. and he's walking his kids to school at 7 a.m. And it is interesting. I feel like in the United States they should flip it around. I think the kids in elementary should get to school earlier, and then we should let the middle schoolers sleep in because they need more sleep, statistically speaking. But you've got this, I got to get up early. I move from one room to many rooms. I've got all of these schedule adjustments that I need to make. When I was at Winning at Home as a therapist, one of the most stressful situations for the young men that I would work with is when they had moved into sixth grade and they went from one room to like 7 different rooms, and they had a lot of anxiety in the transitions between one class and another. It's just like everything switches and everything is in chaos. And then when everything's in chaos, like, and you don't know who you are, you're kind of in this maelstrom of a mess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then it's the whole pressure of, like we talked about earlier, you need to fit in. So what can I do to make people like me? How can I, and you start to lose all the giftings that God gave you because you're
Yeah.
trying to manipulate it and form it into something that never is really even a thing.
No, because if all you're doing is trying to figure out how you can be better for this person or better for this person or better for this person or learn how to fit in here, what you're essentially doing is you're just trying on different personalities that aren't you. And if you do that long enough, you'll get lost. And in fact, they actually call it, I think there's a term for it. It's called the cocktail personality. And it's where essentially it's like you're always going on a date with a different person throughout the course of a day, and you're trying on these different personalities like at a cocktail hour, and you're trying to match with each person what kind of person you should be. But it's exhausting.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I can't imagine trying to be 20 different people in one day. I don't even think I could keep track of that many people.
And I think that's why middle school is so tiring, because and I think for parents listening, one thing just to understand, that is what your child is doing at school. Like, they go to middle school and they are trying on, it maybe not 20 personalities, but it might be 5 to 10. And
Mhm.
and so much of that's why when your kids come home and they are a holy terror and they just blah, or whatever it is, you have to understand, like, they are finally expressing all of the exhaustion in the safest place imaginable with the safest person imaginable, which just happens to be in your home and with you.
Mhm.
And that's tough. And that
That
is
is
such a
tough.
burden.
Because man, when we go, I mean, when you go out in public, you turn on, you put your best self, put your best foot forward. And when you get home, it's exhausting, even as an adult, right?
Totally.
And how often is that where tension happens? Because you're like, oh, great, you gave your best all day long, and now I get the worst of you. And it's like, well,
Yes.
we look at that, we're like, well, we should be flattered then they actually feel safe enough to fully express their genuine emotions around you, and that you're that safe person that can
Yes.
help navigate and regulate those kind of emotions.
And it is, yeah, I mean, so much of that. I love your word, we should be flattered, because it is such a privilege. It doesn't feel like it in the moment, but it
Oh,
is such
doesn't.
a privilege to be that person. And I love your language, to help regulate, because the difference between, like, at least in a normal scenario, neurotypical scenario, the difference between an adult who has been on all day and a child who has been on all day is that ideally we have a fully formed prefrontal cortex, and we can think through critically, and we can do regulation, we can calm down, we can breathe. I want to, before we get into some of the stuff that parents can do, I just have another question for you, because this
Sure.
seems to be a theme that I see and I've seen over the years. Why is it that our children open up to us at the exact time that we are ready to be done for the day?
Are you talking about bedtime? Because that's when it happens at my house.
That is so, yes, that is exactly right. Like, okay, we're ready for we're ready for bed. We've brushed the teeth, we've got the jammies on, it's time, all the thing, we're doing the prayers. I'm ready to sit down, maybe have a beverage, finish up that email or that text message that I have not been able to finish for 5 hours since I got home or whatever. And I don't know, maybe watch Netflix. I don't know. Like, just I'm ready for that. And then there's the question, or then there's the whole, let me tell you about all of the things that happened today. And it's like, well, there goes my
You're like,
night.
where was this at dinner time? Because I was ready to talk at dinner
Oh,
time.
or where was this when I picked you up and I was like, hey, how was your day? Fine,
I
fine.
know, just
It
a
was
fine.
good.
I know. I'm
Okay.
like, are you
Well,
saying fine good or fine bad? Because I don't really know what fine is. Yeah.
and what'd you do today? I forget. That's the worst. Like, oh, I forget. What? You
You
forgot the
literally just
whole
got
day?
done. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what it is that happens in my house too.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, and we even sometimes are like, okay, this is time for me to take my mom hat off and I get to be Marcy again.
Yeah.
But when we rush through that time, what kind of message are you sending your kid? Right.
Totally.
I think,
Totally.
in my opinion, I don't know if this is true for everybody, but I think at bedtime, they're finally not distracted. They're not
Yeah.
stimulated by anything. And so all of a sudden, all these things start coming out that they wanted to say earlier, but didn't know how to say. And maybe they had time to process their day. And
Mm.
then they're all excited about everything they did that day, or, whatever
Mm.
negative situation happened to them. Maybe they maybe really did forget
Yeah.
until that.
That makes sense. And even as you say that, I mean, I have talked with parents about, I've taught on this before, that when you go through neurological stimulation and then you have a break, you get a break, a brain break. There's something that occurs that engages was like neuroplasticity, and so your brain starts to repair and all of this, and maybe, just maybe, after our kids have gone through a whirlwind of a day and they've been in information saturation and they've been trying on personalities and they finally get into the car, they actually don't have anything because their brains are exhausted and they just can't access that information anymore. They can't access that part of their brain. But then after a day of dinner or sports are done and the phones go away and I brush my teeth and I'm in bed and I'm safe and I'm seen and I'm soothed and I'm loved, the brain can finally relax. And then all of a sudden it opens up and it's like, hey, now it's time to process.
Yeah. Well, and what are your thoughts on this? I'm curious. I think as adults, we can fill our calendar until the very end of our day,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
So
I'm
there's a,
seeing, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, I'm seeing the more, as time goes on, kids' calendars are getting just as full.
Totally.
And so they might even have, band practice, sports practice, whatever kind of lesson they have after school. And it goes so late in the day. So not only are they overstimulated now at school, between what we talked about, personality, trying to fit in with school, plus learning and education and their new system of living, but now we're putting on more with extra sports practices that go for like 5 hours by the way,
Yeah.
and then, but I have to have piano lessons too, and I have to have this and this, because if I don't do that, then I can't keep up with whatever. So there's that
Totally.
extra stimulation that they've got. So it's no wonder bedtime is the time they have to actually process.
Yeah. Well, yes. If as parents, if we can't get our schedules under control, our kids don't have a hope of it. That's just a reality. There's a great book called A Minute to Think by Juliet Funt. She is the founder of an organization called White Space. And so for those listening, you probably remember, even if maybe you have this, like in paper calendars back in the day where we had paper calendars that we would like write our itinerary in. I still use one of those, even though I have it on my phone and all this stuff. The space between events was called white space because it was a white paper calendar and there was nothing in there. And the danger of our society is that we try to fill white space with more stuff so we can be more effective. What we're doing though is we are hamstringing ourselves, because you actually need space between events for your brain to function, for your stress levels to de-escalate, for your cortisol levels to go down. There's so many benefits to taking a break. I think in his book, uh, Praying Like Monks, Living Like Fools, Tyler Staton says that the word rest in Latin is vacate, and that's the word we get vacation from. And so many of us don't know how to rest on vacation because our lives are so itinerant. And we plan our vacations to be structured, but the whole point of a vacation is actually to take a break. And I
Yeah.
encourage parents and I encourage clients as well. Listen, if your lives are heavily scheduled, you've got to force time for a break. You've got to do it for you. Your kids need it too. In fact, your kids need it more than you do because their brains are still forming. And there's so much neurological activity that is occurring and so much shaping. I think the CDC says right now that the average American needs 7 to 10 hours of sleep a night to be healthy. Teenagers need 10 to 12 hours. And
That is insane.
there are so many research pieces that are going on right now. There's so much that's going on with neuroscience to prove this. But I was just reading, there's something called inflammation. And essentially, if you don't get enough sleep, the research is showing that your the blood vessels in your body constrict, and therefore you're not getting enough oxygen. Your body is holding on to water and other toxins, and your body becomes inflamed, and we feel bloated and all of these things. That's why people, if they don't get enough sleep, feel sick in the mornings. It's all this stuff. But what it does to your brain is even worse. It actually starts to destroy cognitive functioning, and it creates higher levels of cortisol, which means you can't regulate as well. And they're even finding, this is crazy, that a lack of sleep for prolonged periods is carcinogenic. It causes cancer. And so
crazy.
all of this to say, we go. We cram. We sleep less, we do more, and then we can't figure out why we're so stressed out.
It's amazing. You hear of the, you can only live without water for a couple days and you can only live without food for, a little bit longer. It's actually proven that you live less with less sleep.
Yep.
Even between the water and the food, like you need your sleep more than almost water and food. I mean, think about when you've been up for so long, how crazy all of a sudden you get hallucinating and like delirious and all that. Like you literally, like you lose all your function.
Yep. And so for all of this, for our kids, I mean, just for parents who are listening, especially if you have children of younger ages, establishing routines of good sleep now and good boundaries. Like, it is okay to say no. In fact, no is probably the word your children need to hear the most. As children enter into middle school, they start a process of individuation, which is a big technical term for how do I fit in the world and what do I say no to? And they don't know how to say no. And so parents, they need you to say no for them, and they need you to help them remember who they are. And Marcy, that's why initially that's why I wanted to get you on the podcast, because you actually created a resource for some of your clients, and I saw it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It's so good. It's so helpful. So tell us a little bit about like the process of that, why the resource, what people can do with it. Yeah, take it away.
Yeah. So I created this vision guide for back to school, but essentially it's not discriminate to anybody. Everybody can do this. But I think we get to school and all of a sudden all of these things happen and we're like, oh no, I lost myself. And it's almost like you have to go back and redo and fix all these things. And I thought, well, what about being proactive with this kind of stuff, right? Taking, we always want to take off on summer and that's great, but let's work on this kind of stuff so that we can solidify and ground ourselves and our identity in the Lord so that we're armored up when we go into these situations. And so that's kind of where, especially like I'm a freshman and a senior, and it's like, what is my vision for my kids? I know I can't control them, but what kind of conversations can I have with them? How can I encourage them and relate with them so that they can start to think about these things themselves? And so that's kind of the heartbeat behind this. And one of the biggest quotes that I dislike is perception is reality. I don't know if you've heard that one.
Yeah.
I hate it because it's both true and it's false.
Yes.
You know, it's true because whatever my circumstance is, whatever I start to believe is my reality.
Yes.
But whatever you perceive about me might not be reality. And
Yeah.
so when we can do this kind of work and anchor ourselves and get ourselves right, not only am I protecting myself from the information that I'm gathering from what you might be perceiving about me, but in the end, I get to protect you because now I've got the lens of Jesus on. I've got
Yes.
compassion, I've got curiosity and understanding. And so I'm not going to emit different perceptions about you. And so therefore, I'm also protecting you and your identity. And so
yeah, I love that. I love that. I agree with you. I think even a false reality is a reality, and that's the problem. I mean,
yeah,
that's the double-edged kind of sword of the perception is reality, that I can believe a lot of things about myself that aren't true, and that can become my reality, even though the reality is that's not who I really am. And that's why it gets so complicated, which is
yeah,
why your vision guide, I think, is really helpful, because you ask the questions, well, who am I? But you ask them through the lens of what God already has said in scripture. And so just talk us through just a few of the questions that you ask and a few of the elements that you work through, and why some of the verses that you chose.
yeah. Well, one of the biggest things I think we combat is the culture, right? Success, achieve. I got to look at this way. And so I also, I created this. I don't know if you've heard of the life wheel, where
Hmm.
it kind of assesses where you are with your career, with your finances, with your hobbies, with your romance, your romantic life, with your whatever. But I created this self-image wheel that has 5 big umbrellas under it. It's
Okay.
very granular. It takes a lot to get through, but I think it's good work. There's 5 different big umbrellas of like inner self-image, emotional wellness, your physical self-image, your social professional self-image, life purpose and fulfillment. And
Mm,
so in this vision guide, I walk you through those 5 umbrella things in the lens of Jesus, right? And so
wow.
the very first question is talking about your self-identity in Christ. And I think we forget in this culture where it is success achieved, we already are lovely and worthy and enough in the lens of Jesus because he is in us. He
Yeah.
died for us. We're worthy. We don't have to work for any of this anymore.
Yes.
And so I think that's kind of the heartbeat behind even what I do as a coach and behind these tools that I have is helping you to anchor in those and know like it's a gift. You've already got it. And so helping when you walk through
Yeah.
ways that just the unique ways that you're God's creation, you didn't have to earn it. You didn't have to work for it. And you don't need to put on this mask to be accepted by Jesus.
Man, that is so helpful. That is so good, because you're really, and through this tool, helping people get to the right starting point. If it, and again, whether you're in middle school, high school, college, adulthood, senior years, it doesn't matter. If you're working really hard, but you're starting in the wrong place, you're going to end up somewhere where you don't want to be. And if you start at the right place and you start with Jesus and you start with those foundations, well, then you can set a vision and you can set a goal for the future that is in alignment with what Jesus has said. Then you can work hard all you want.
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to succeed and wanting to achieve, but you don't want to strive and you don't want to burn out trying to be something and prove yourself when you don't have to be who God said you are because you're uniquely and beautifully made just the way you are. And he's already equipped you with everything you need. I love the quote, and I can't remember where I heard it, but God is not concerned with your inadequacies or your iniquities. He is also not flattered by you at all. He can work in you no matter what. And so when we can get to that, I mean, yes, when you are passionate about something and you find what you want to study and go to school for and succeed in, do those things, but start from the foundation of you are already equipped. You already are who he says that you are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is, I think that's so powerful. I feel like you need to be in front of 100 teenage girls every week. That's what I feel like. Because
thank you for saying that.
From my time at Winning at Home, from my time in the church, talking with parents, the pressure of performing is so debilitating for young girls. Leonard Sachs wrote a book, Girls on the Edge, and he noted that, and this was in the early 2000s, that young women in their teenage years, they are cutting more, they have more body distortion, there's more self-harm that is taking place, and all of this comes from this place of not knowing who I am and performing and overperforming to the point where I'm burned out and I'm hurting inside. And because I'm hurting inside, I need to do something physically to my body so that I hurt outside, so I don't have to hurt inside as much. And that's really where cutting is coming from. And that's where a lot of this self-harm is coming from. And I feel like a resource like yours and the conversation point of like, hey, start with Jesus and start with who he says you are. It might not fix all of the stuff inside, but it can put you in a place where you don't have to be overwhelmed anymore and you don't have to be exhausted from it.
Right. No, that is so true. I mean, you just said it perfectly. I feel like there's a sense of, we talk about business and we talk about the hurt inside. And when you can't find even that white space because you're filling, I mean, think about the white space, right? Like you had said before, what are our kids filling it with? They pick up their phones. They don't know how to be bored anymore. And now they're getting stimulated even more. And it's, I think that cloudiness that creates the pain, that creates the uncertainty, creates all of that. And we're lacking the ability to be compassionate on ourselves, to fully feel our emotions to the extreme, and even give ourselves permission. I mean, how often was it, I think, I don't know, at least when I was a kid, it's like, buck up, buttercup, like, it's okay, you're sad, but you'll get over it. It's like, well, let me feel this for a moment. Let me just, if I can give that pain a voice just for a minute, because it just wants to be felt and heard, well, now it's not going to saturate the rest of my conversations and the rest of my life, because I gave it a space.
Yes.
And so when
there's
we can,
please
I just think when we snuff out those kind of emotions, we're also just teaching ourselves not to feel anything. And so then it gets to that point of self-harm, like you said, well, I got to just feel something. And if I can feel physical pain, then it's either I feel too much inside or I feel nothing at all. So I got to feel something. So.
Yes, there's a great book. It's called Widen the Window. You'd love it. It's got a ton of research in it, but the author, she was in the military, and they had a motto in the military, in the Army, when she was serving: suck it up and drive on. And it was really just code for, oh, you hurt? Well, suck it up, drive on. We got to keep moving. And she carried that attitude, that mentality into the rest of her life, and the debilitating effects of trauma and the lingering pain that she had been through, it started to take a physical effect on her body. And Bessel van der Kolk, who's a researcher and doctor, and he wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score, talks about that
Yes,
as
I
well,
love
that
that
our
book.
bodies will physically hold on to the emotional pain that we go through. And so there is a part of us that needs to feel physically what we feel emotionally if we don't tend to the pain in our soul. And it can get really scary. I mean, if you, I'm sure you've had clients, I'm sure you've had, friends, family friends. I know I have, of cutters and biters and bruisers and burners and all the things. That's a really
Yeah,
scary place to be for a parent and for a child.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I fully believe it. I mean, your body is the thing that comes with you in every
Hmm,
experience and
hmm,
conversation you have. So it's
hmm.
no wonder it does hold on to all of that stuff, right? It's the
That's so
only thing
wise.
that's 100% with you all the time. So of
Wow.
course you need an out. Of course you need an outlet. And that's also why I host dance floors for people to like
Yeah.
express and reconnect and rediscover what
Yes.
that looks like to embody, not only get the emotions out, but embody some of the truths that God says that we are. If God says that you're a lovely human being and you believe it, it makes you live, move, and breathe differently. So when we can
Totally.
practice that in a safe place, you build
Yeah.
up that muscle memory, and guess where you get to take it the rest of your
Everywhere
life?
you go, because your
Everywhere
body's
you
always
go.
with you. I love
Exactly.
I'll probably say that now for the rest of my life. I'm gonna quote you, but like, hey, your body's always with you. Like it, of
Yeah.
course that would make sense. Like that is brilliant. Um, I just I love that. So I think that we're gonna put a link to this resource. When I saw it, I reached out to your husband. I was like, hey, this is really good. And Marcy should charge for this. Like it's good
Oh,
and it's but like you should parents, you should buy it. Uh, you should buy it. You should go through it for yourself, go through it with your kids. But this is something that I think if you want to set your daughters and your sons up well for success in the kingdom of God, which is different than success in the world, and you want to see them start in a place that is healthy and good so they can finish in a place that is healthy and good, I think you need this resource. I think you need this vision guide. I think you need to go through it for yourself. And so we're going to make that available in the podcast notes. And Marcy, where can people find you?
oh, well, I'm at Winning at Home right now. You can find me there, or I have a website, poeimacoachingmi.com. You can find me there. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. That you can see Marcy Kolean. You'll find Poeima Coaching there too. So
Awesome. Well, we'll have links to Poeima Coaching, and we'll have links to Winning at Home where people can get in touch with you there as well. And if people want to reach out to you, I'm sure they can find you on the different avenues. That's easy enough. So
for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
just so grateful for you to be with us and share with us. Marcy, I'm actually going to give you the last word here. So what do you think people need to hear today as they listen to this?
What I hope they get out of this is just that some encouragement as parents, like you're doing a good job,
Hmm,
and if you're listening to this and you're excited about this, like please walk with your kids through this. And I feel like when we can anchor ourselves as parents and as just human beings in the image of God, I mean, you're protecting your heart, you're protecting yourself, but you're also protecting everybody else. And so
yeah,
it starts with you. It starts with you.
so good. Marcy, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. This was really fun.
We should do it again.
Happy to. Happy to. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Wasn't that amazing? I really believe that Marcy should be in front of like 100 middle school, high school girls and their parents a week. It is so critical to hear what she has to say. And I'm telling you, as you look through the resource that she created, I really believe that that vision guide can be something that is incredibly powerful for you, incredibly powerful for your kids. And I just want to encourage you, go check it out. Go to our link tree, go and download it. It really is a gift. And so I'm excited for you to try that out. If you want to get in touch with Marcy, feel free to send us an email at chaplaincy@fearlessfollower.org. You can also go to our website, fearlesschaplaincy.org. You can learn more about us and learn how to get into contact with us. That's all we've got for now. We will talk with you later.